Good evening, everybody. I realize I'm standing between you and the cultural event and the party, so I will keep my remarks very short. The professor here has already covered half of my lecture, and the other professors have covered the other half, so I have very little to say. I want to start with one question that was asked some time ago, and it actually follows up on what Bill was saying. And the question relates to nations as a brand. Can a country have a reputation? And in some sense it is very similar to what you see as a product. Right? The only difference is that the level of analysis is not at the product level, but the level of analysis is at the country level. So, is the country a brand? And the buyer in this case is the investor. The companies that will invest in this country through foreign direct investment. So that is really the question that one needs to ask is, can emerging markets be national brands? I want to talk about three things. Number one is about emotions and identities. I want to talk about nations as brands, and I want to share some final thoughts about this phenomena. Every nation projects an image on the world stage. Every nation does. If I mention a country name, there will be words that pop up in your head. That essentially is the current branding of that country on your mindset. And more or less, that mindsets are very similar. If you think about a particular country, the keywords are imprinted in our brain. Whether those keywords are justified or they are not justified, those are the keywords and those are the imprints. And those are the things that the nation has to deal with, rightly or wrongly. We have three images of emerging markets. The first image is the Sadhuji sitting in the middle of Himalayas, communing with the Lord. 17th century image of emerging markets, backward, naked, sitting in isolation and hoping that something will fall down. 17th century. 18th century, you have a sadhu. I don't know if you can see him, but he is sadhu, he is smoking and he has a cell phone. Right? So he's a very integrated sadhu. Yeah? With the phone company and the thing, and there is, you can see that he doesn't have, he doesn't seem to have any hesitation about doing what he's doing. So he's integrating. This is the second generation Sadhuji. And here is a third image. Right? The 21st century sadhu who has found the God and who is now taking selfies because he believes that he is God. So there are three images of emerging markets. The one that you see on the left is the traditional one, the one in the middle, and the one on the side. And we have to find some happy medium between these. I mentioned earlier about national identities. If you look at China, what comes to mind? Cheap manufacturing. If you look at Japan, you're talking reliability, quality. If you talk Germany, you're talking engineering progress. Singapore, modern, multinational, welcoming, all those kinds of things. USA, you're looking at technology and innovation. Now these are the imprints on my brain. So if any of those names pop up, that's what I'm thinking about. But there is something more than that. That these nations have carved out those images not based on what they are doing necessarily, but based on the core values. And here are the core values that you see. The cheap manufacturing comes from a mindset of being very, very frugal. Very cheap, very inexpensive, very long-term thinking. If you think about Japan, the reliability is just the outcome of a core value that talks about continuous improvement. If nothing is wrong, they will still tinker with it. Same thing for Germany. Ultimate imperfection, it drives an Indian mad. Yeah? If you see the toilets, simple toilets, okay, it's an engineering marvel. Singapore, the core value is discipline, and the discipline is the one that has led to modernity and multinationality. It's a good place to be, and every expat will tell you that, and so on. Every nation has built a core value, but not every nation has achieved the kind of successes that seem to be associated with core values. The key point here is if you look at India, which is number 4, and you compare it to China, which is basically number 1 and number 2 combined, India's share is very, very, very minuscule. And the obvious question that I ask is, what is it that we are missing? Why is it that we have not attracted enough foreign direct investment? Because if you say that the core value is the one that is generating the foreign direct investment, we have those core values. I mean, nobody doubts that India does not have core values. A culture that is 5,000 years old has very, very strong core values, but those core values don't seem to resonate with the foreign direct investment. And you have to ask yourself why. What are we missing? And to be able to answer what we are missing, I would ask you to start thinking about what we really have. In this audience, is there anybody who might disagree with this list that I have put up? This is my reading of India. What do we have? Do we have deep-rooted culture and strong values? The answer is yes. Do we have strong national institutions? The answer is yes. Do we have smart people, educated people, hardworking people, and so on? The answer is yes. Are they well informed? You go to a street corner in the middle of a village in nowhere, and the panwala will tell you things about United States. He may not have a right assessment of it, but he knows what's going on in the United States. So he is well informed. You ask a little child what is going on, and they will tell you. So they are well informed. And finally, we even have a prime minister that is very pro-business. What is it that we are missing? And that is a question that I would urge us all to think about. Let's think a little bit about branding. It doesn't have to be national branding. Think of it as a product. The word used here was unique selling proposition. Do we know ourselves? Do we know our value proposition? And do we know our target market? In other words, are we able to bridge the gap between the external and the internal? At at the end of the day, you can put whatever label you want. Is there a matching between what we know and what we have to know? And as long as you have interconnectedness among the three, you have a good brand. Once the interconnectedness drops, even if one of those arrows goes away, you really don't have a brand. And that is something that successful nations need to understand. What are your core values? What is it that you bring to the party? And what is it that the world wants? If you cannot answer this three-part sequence, you haven't really answered anything. If you look at the countries that have succeeded in branding themselves, there are several themes that keep coming up. One is that they have a very, very, very long-term perspective. I have friends who sit on boards in Chinese corporations, and at the board meetings they are not talking about what's going on in the next 5 years. They will start board meeting by saying, let's imagine what's going on, what the situation is going to be in the next 200 years. 200 years in the boardrooms. We're not worried about what is going on. The American company, by contrast, will tell you, well, what are our quarterly profits? So 3-month horizon versus a 200-year horizon. A functioning ecosystem. Everything is very well connected to everything else. If one of those things in the chain, in the ecosystem breaks, you have no ecosystem. Germany has done a fantastic job. Japan has done a fantastic job. Singapore has a fantastic job. China has done a fantastic job. Yeah? One message. One message. What is China known for? Cheap manufacturing. And it keeps popping out. Boom, 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 boom. China. Cheap manufacturing. China. Cheap manufacturing. One message and the world gets it. And then you have one strong voice, one party, one system. Everybody is basically revolving around the same idea, the same message, the same thing, and we are doing this consistently. And there is tremendous resolve on part of these countries to carry out what they said they wanted to carry out. I'm heading to Germany tomorrow. And I've been to Germany several times. I talked to the people there who own multi-billion-dollar companies. Multi-billion-dollar companies. They are thinking, we must invest in the long term. We don't care about profits. And that kind of thinking, we must give back to our local community. We must contribute to Germany. We must contribute to the development of society. And that kind of thinking goes on from one generation to second generation to third generation to fourth generation. I have been in companies that are 200-year-old companies that you have never heard of. They are world leaders holding 80, 85, 90% market share. In Europe, 65, 70% market share globally. Resolve. That's what Germany is known for. Now, India has had this for a very, very long time. So these things are not new things. If you look at what got us where we are, you had all of those things, but somewhere, sometime, things got lost, things got dissipated, and now we are into, just floating around aimlessly, unfortunately. but we need some more things. So we have these things. Obviously, these things are not enough. So what is it that we need as a nation? I think above all we need internal discipline. I'll give you a simple example. If you go down to the road and it says no U-turn, you will see cars making a U-turn there. If it says no spitting here, people will spit there. Right? If they will tell you don't use cell phone, the first thing they will do is use the cell phone. No discipline. Very unfortunate. Competitive orientation. Some of this is the legacy of the British Empire, where we were, and even our own early faults, historical faults, where we really saw outsiders as enemies, right? And the best way to protect against the enemy is to shut your door, and that is exactly what we did. So there was no reason to develop the muscle strength to fight what is out there. Well, lo and behold, 50 years later, you have competitors standing on your doorstep, and suddenly you cannot compete because you never had to compete. There is a problem. You don't have a brand because you have no product. You have no product because you have had to develop no product because of the mindset that we had. The third thing is, do we have institutions? Absolutely, we do have institutions. Nobody doubts it. Nobody doubts it. The question is not whether you have institutions, the question is whether you have effective institutions. Nobody says that we don't have schools. Question is, how many of these are effective schools? Nobody says we have a non-functioning democracy. Question is democracy basically grinding us to a halt? Judicial system, same thing. Regulatory system, same thing. Mired in bureaucracy and so on and so forth. By not doing anything about these things, you're sending a message. If you do something, you're sending a message. If you don't do something, you are still sending a message. And the question is, what is the message you are sending through inaction? And finally, the notion of collective national identity. If you go to any part of China, or if you ask any Chinese outside China, so where are you from? He or she will tell you, I'm Chinese. If you go and ask an Indian, where are you from? They will say, I'm from Bangalore, I'm from Mumbai, I'm from Chennai. They will never say, I'm an Indian. If you are lucky, they will tell you, I'm a North Indian or South Indian. No collective identity. I was joking with our hosts earlier, as saying that India is divided into two parts, Bombay and rest of India. The fellow in Delhi also thinks exactly the same. According to the Delhiite, India is also divided into two parts, Delhi and rest of India. No collective identity. So if you have no collective identity, can you imagine a company that has no collective identity and still is a brand? And this is exactly the problem. So if you don't have the things that make it possible to move from where we are to making it a brand, why should anybody be interested in coming to you and seeking out whatever it is that we have to offer? And we do have a lot to offer. We do have a lot to offer. And you see that Modi ji, through his various struggles and various speeches and policy changes and so on and so forth, has essentially signaled that he understands what these imperatives are. What we have, nobody takes it away. Nobody says you don't have this. But we also need some more things. So the packet that makes India or makes emerging markets a brand is a much bigger packet than the packet we presently have. And you can actually see that in 2013, this was the doubt. Can India become a great power? And only 2 years later, it has changed. Cautious optimism, but it's there in 2 years. So my point here is that we do have the potential to shine. And by we, I don't mean just India, I also mean a lot of other emerging markets. We do have the potential to shine. The question is, what will it take us and how much time will it take us to make this potential a reality? And as you are sitting here in the audience, in the 5 years, 10 years out, you are essentially going to lead the companies that you are probably interning for. And these will be the kinds of questions that you really need to ask yourself. These are the kinds of questions that our previous speakers have in fact raised. So what is it that it takes? What are we missing? And I would urge you that as you are progressing through your education, also think about these kinds of educational questions to which I don't have answers. I don't have answers to these, and I'm not sure that anybody has answers to these kinds of things. But simply because we have no answers doesn't mean that you shouldn't be searching for one. And that is the charge on you guys, on us, and on individuals from all other emerging markets, is that if in fact emerging markets have to become a brand, they will have to think about some of the issues that take the country from point A to point B and what it is that is needed. And it is a big charge, and it is a charge that you have to shoulder. Now with that, I will stop my presentation here. Something for you to think about.